Hi, volleyball fans, and welcome back to Volley Talk, the podcast created for volleyball lovers who want to dig deep into what is going on in NCAA and international volleyball. I'm your host, Sarah Pavin. I'm an Olympian, beach volleyball world champion, former Nebraska Cornhusker, and longtime pro, both indoor and on the beach.
And I'm Adam Schultz, former indoor player, international volleyball coach, and the show's resident stat guy.
The past week was week 1
Banger.
of women's VNL, and we had a wide range of experience and depth show up on the various rosters from these teams, okay? I think it's fair to say we had some moments where we were very impressed and some moments that left us concerned.
Confused.
Scratching our heads. But we are very excited to share our thoughts on what we observed from this week of play. And it is early, we understand that, but we have thoughts anyway, you know that. So as I said, we're very excited. So let's get started. We've got just a quick little rundown of some highlights this week. Something that nobody probably expected. Flor Marie Heredia Colon, who left Miami for Florida in NCAA women's play, of course. Can we go an episode without touching on it? No. She's heading back to Miami.
That's just, it's an awkward situation. Like,
so awkward.
I'm leaving probably to look for more money. Oh, wait.
Or a better team because I don't think this team's good enough. Or whatever her reason was. We don't know.
And
took a few months in Florida.
Now nobody else wants me, so I'm back.
No, Kennedy Martin pieces out. The writing's on the wall for Florida. And she's like, hey, can I come back?
It's, yeah.
Well, they took her. So maybe she left on good terms. But she is heading back. She just took a sabbatical.
It's
okay,
a tough,
down the road to Gainesville.
It's a tough look for the team coming into the dressing room, I think. I think it's going to be.
Yeah, that's tricky. But I wanted to touch on that because it was just kind of different, you know? Different than what we usually see. We also have a few new signings for Love. There were 3 more added this week. The first one is Indre Sorokaite. She is a very experienced Italian player. She's got to be close to my age at this point. I played against her from the beginning of my pro career, which was eons ago. So I'm pretty sure her last international appearance for Italy was in 2017. But she is very experienced. She's played in numerous Champions Leagues, Cups, Super Copas, you name it. So Sorokaite is heading to Love. We've also got Magdalena Jurczyk. She's Polish. I like to try my hand at the accents, you know, and to get the names right. I'm butchering all of them. But she has played her entire career, I believe, in Poland. Played for Poland's national team, was at the Paris Olympics. Poland came 6th. So she's heading there. And a Bulgarian player named Miroslava Paskova also signed. So those are the 3 new additions that are confirmed for Love Season 2, aside from the ones we touched on last week.
Since we're talking about everything not VNL, one of the questions was, have we heard anything about Major League yet? Crickets, everybody. Crickets.
Can't even keep a straight face because they had a lot to say.
In January.
They had a lot to say about all the stuff they were going to do and how major it was going to be. Time's a ticking. You're going to get this league going in 6 months, apparently. So, no, we haven't heard anything. I wonder if it's going to happen. I wonder what's going to happen to the Omaha Supernovas after all of that bluster, too.
Because you got to think that, like, the owners of the leagues are not happy with how that all goes down. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe force new ownership. Who knows?
You stir up all of that in the PVF, you better execute.
I don't know. Anyway,
We love the drama. We love it so much. But no, we haven't heard anything about that. See, wow. Snip, snap. Super quick. Just had to hit on, a couple things that happened that crossed my eyeballs that we had to share. So that is what happened aside from women's VNL this week.
Let's get into the VNL because there's lots to talk about.
We are breaking this down into a couple sections. So let's start with the VNL Week 1 recap.
Japan, Italy, and Turkey all went 4-0, with Japan currently in first place because they have a perfect set ratio.
Yeah, Italy and Turkey won a couple matches in 5, I believe, or one of them in 5, yeah.
So I would say not surprising.
I was a little surprised at how dominant Japan was. I expected Italy and Turkey and that group to kind of be up there, yeah.
I will say Japan, their serving just puts teams in so much trouble, and their ability to keep rallies going was impressive to watch.
The consistency of their service pressure. As we're watching all these games, and to be frank, we didn't watch every single game, you guys. We didn't watch every single team. So please keep this in mind before you get mad at us for something.
I mean, we did watch a lot.
We watched a bunch, but we didn't hit everybody.
I think I watched 6 or 7 matches. I think you probably watched 10.
I don't even know.
We watched...
I was addicted to it this week.
Yeah, we watched a legitimate amount of volleyball this week.
But, okay, we didn't see absolutely everything. But Japan, you see a lot of these games, and you'll see some ebbs and flows with the service pressure. Like when teams are feeling it, they really go for it, and then you can see the pucker start to happen sometimes, and they really take the pressure off. Japan does not quit. No matter what the situation, they know that they need to get teams out of system and keep them off the net. So they are relentless in their service pressure, and they're very consistent.
Yeah. So those teams top the heap going into week 2. Poland and Brazil are in 4th and 5th with 3 wins each. Fair enough.
Again, expected.
Yeah. Italy beat Brazil handily, which I wasn't really expecting. Brazil was missing Gabi, but they had a lot of players there.
Else.
So
Rosa Maria wasn't there.
Yeah, so that I was a little surprised to see that result. But I'm not surprised that they did well in pool play. And then we had Korea and Serbia are at the bottom. They went 0-4. Serbia has 3 points. Korea has 1. Serbia almost squeaked one out against Canada at the end, but did not. And then we have USA, France, Thailand, and Belgium all with 1 win each. They all have 3 points except for the US, who has 4.
So, yeah, we've got, of course, this is week 1. Things are going to change. Things are going to shake up. But, we got a solid group, usual suspects, kind of what we expect at the top. Korea, probably expected to be at the bottom. Serbia, we'll get into the roster construction for week 1 soon, but, Serbia probably doesn't intend to stay down there. But that is what happened this week. That's where the teams currently are sitting, heading into their week off. So I think a question that I have for you is, which teams made a good impression on you, and which ones did you feel were disappointing?
I would say for me, when I looked at China's roster, who has an average age of 21.5 on their week 1 roster, they were better than I thought they were going to be. China, for me, they surprised me at how well they played, how much composure they had for such a young roster. Yeah, I was not sure.
And a 16-year-old setter.
Yeah, I was not sure what I expected when I saw their roster, but it was not that, and they were good. Netherlands, for me, was also surprising. They have a lot of young players, a lot of kind of 2002, 2003, 2004 in critical positions.
And we are going to get into the roster breakdowns later. We understand that some teams showed up with their stars. A lot of teams did developmental, but we will touch on that later. So hang tight.
Yeah, so I think watching them play, I was impressed. And then probably Germany, I thought, did better than I was expecting. I think they pushed a couple teams in pool play, which I thought were probably going to be 3-0 beatings. So I didn't watch them play a ton, but the results given that the pool they were in, I was surprised.
I did watch them play against Brazil. They were solid. The full team effort. Not one player was like relied upon super heavily. I thought, very balanced. I thought they did a good job. The only team that I would kind of add to that is Turkey, simply for the fact that they brought a more developmental roster. They did have Baladine there. They had a few players there, but the meat of their roster that we typically see at big tournaments did not even show up. They were not there. And I think to see the sort of B line, the B side, play so solidly, and like I would add them. But I agree. I had Germany, Turkey, China on my list. China was playing at home, which is helpful, but that does come with a lot of pressure at the same time. But with a 16-year-old setter stepping into that role, very, very young athletes going head-to-head with Poland, with Turkey. There were a couple weaker teams in their group, but yeah, they impressed me as well.
I think, and maybe this is bias, but I was disappointed by North America.
Those are the two teams I had on my list as well, not going to lie.
Yeah, and in fairness, I thought Van Rijk played really well. Pretty much all pool play matches. Like, she was very good, but the rest of the team kind of is lacking. They won a couple matches riding her ability to score and serve.
Matches that honestly they won in 5, and I don't think it should have been 5.
Yeah.
They lost opportunities for sure this week.
Fair. So, credit where credit's due. Van Rijk is very good, but they don't have any other pieces there that I thought could help carry the team. Like, nobody else could score consistently. And then I look at if I look at who they're going to possibly bring in, I'm not sure who that is. Like, Alexa Gray's not even on the VNL roster, so she's not playing. I kind of felt like that was maybe the best roster they could put on the floor.
I agree. The only one is they had Jazz White as an alternate.
Who played against Serbia.
They called her up, okay, in the final match against Serbia. But other than that, I'm pretty sure they brought the best roster they could. And
they didn't have very many of the best teams in their pool.
No.
I was expecting more. I thought Brie O'Reilly struggled. I thought their outsides struggled to score. I thought Maglio was good at times, but their passing wasn't super consistent to get her the ball. I thought Thokboom, as a young player coming in, did a pretty good job, but they're going to need to find more players to score points other than Van Rijk. Like, it can't be a solo show.
I think I knew they were in trouble in match 1 when they played Bulgaria, which Bulgaria, they did better than I expected this week, but they had to set Van Rijk almost every ball. If they're going to rely on her that much against the likes of a Bulgaria, this isn't going to be a smooth VNL for them. And I understand they're missing a huge piece in Alexa Gray, but I think this week really showed how big of a piece they are missing with Alexa Gray.
Yeah.
And a lot of the starters from last season, the last couple of years, are back. We had Thokboom switch with Jazz White. We had Mitrovic come in for Alexa Gray's spot that we've typically seen. But I agree. I was very disappointed in Brie O'Reilly. I think her location and her consistency was not good. And I was
Her bump setting was...
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was disturbed. Honestly, that's the best word I can come up with for her bump setting. Unhittable.
And she had to bump set a lot of balls.
But not just her. The team in general, their out-of-system setting, not okay. The number of free balls that were put over or balls that people didn't even jump on where you're not even running that far to set it. The out-of-system setting, lack of production, and Hillary Johnson for me... You've been a starter for years, and where did you go? Where did you go? Not producing offensively. Ball control was lacking. I was not happy watching that. I think the last piece I want to talk about for Canada was their lack of on-court leadership. Again, we're not on the court, but in observing, it seemed like a lot of the energy, a lot of the pushback was coming from Guidetti on the sideline. And there was nobody on the court that really looked to like they were running things from an emotional, motivational perspective. It just seemed like a lot of going through the motions, and nobody was really taking charge on the court.
And in crunch time, it looked like most athletes were tentative except for Van Ryk.
Well, she can't afford to be tentative. I'm sorry.
And she did a good job. But it'll be interesting to see, listening to some of the timeouts, Guidetti is very blunt, very kind of in your face with his feedback, with what's happening.
I felt his feedback was accurate, though.
Totally.
And it was right.
Totally agree. But there were the body language coming out of those timeouts sometimes looked like a little shocked or surprised at what they were hearing. And, given Canada's history with European coaches, it's not stellar. I'm curious to see how this goes and processes with kind of that little bit of clash, I would say.
Okay, so here's my take on that. This might be a hot take, but this is from years of observation and experience firsthand. My experience is that North American athletes, North American volleyball players in general, there are obviously exceptions to this. North American volleyball players in general do not like to be confronted with their inadequacies in a straightforward, in-your-face way. North Americans like to have it massaged. Say it to me, but say it to me in a nice way. Being thrown this information in an aggressive way, being held accountable in a very blunt way. I have seen it so many times. It is not always received well. And while I think Guidetti's feedback was spot on,
totally accurate,
you could almost see the players shrinking.
He looked at the left side and said, "You're passing at under 33%, pass the ball," in one of the timeouts. Totally fair and accurate.
I was watching the game. I'm like, 100%. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. The world of volleyball, aside from North America, is very blunt. In your face, blunt. This isn't good enough. You are confronted with your shortcomings in a very direct way. And yeah, in my experience, North Americans struggle with that broadly.
So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like Van Ryk has played in those situations, so she'll get over it. You've seen her perform.
No, she did her job.
Yeah.
You could not ask more from Kira Van Ryk this weekend. Unfortunately, it is going to be a very long VNL for her and for Canada in general if somebody else can't figure out how to score a point. Yeah.
So I'm curious to see, because their next pool is not going to be easy.
No. The U.S. Okay. I know what I am disappointed in. What are you disappointed in?
So I understand that the roster is not young, but they're not experienced. I think a whole bunch of players played fine. You're up against Italy and Brazil.
Who brought good rosters?
You're not going to win. I was expecting to see a little more pushback in those matches than I did. They got, -1 set against Brazil. I think they went to overtime, but they got rolled pretty good by those teams. Czech Republic, you got reverse swept against them. You know, that's a team that's in their first VNL, so they have even less experience than you do. You know, that's a game you probably shouldn't lose, you know, and they won their last one, which was good. But I think for me, the concern, maybe it's disappointment's the wrong word. The concern I have is that I didn't see much change from a college level style of volleyball. So what I mean by that was their offense was pretty slow. Granted, they didn't pass amazing for most of the tournament.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're running high balls outside. We're not running a lot of speed. Defensively, I didn't see many adjustments. You're packed into the court, you know, defending the middle of the court, similar to a college style game where, you know, in my opinion, you need to be back a little bit more. The defensive systems and setups didn't seem to be adjusting with the style of play or the opponents that you were playing. It just, I understand that they're there to learn, but they didn't seem to get better or change at all over the course of the tournament. And I think that was maybe the most disappointing thing for me.
I hear what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. I don't think, like, this is a different situation for me than the Canada discussion we just had, because Canada, a lot of those players who were on the court have VNL experience, were making a run at Olympics, like they have been here before.
Totally.
In this situation, I think my disappointment isn't necessarily with the athletes, but with the coaching staff. I think the fact they were playing a very college style of volleyball. Internationally, they swing perimeter. You don't see people take rips straight down unless there's a huge seam, unless an opportunity presents itself. But how, as a coaching staff, are you allowing that type of defensive setup to happen? These girls are sucked into the court, and it's just like, internationally, that is not going to fly. I'm sorry. You need to play perimeter. You need to be told that. And you don't have the experience to necessarily figure it out yourself or know that yourself. But as a coaching staff, you need to guide these athletes and get them to make those changes. I saw no defensive adjustments, block defense. I was watching so many games being like, you are getting beaten by A, B, C. But then you listen to timeouts and it's just like, all right, next point.
It was the positive North American coaching that we talked about. There was again, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but the difference in listening to the timeouts of other teams versus the U.S. timeouts, there was no technical feedback. There was no tactical feedback. It was like, hey, keep going. Like, we're here,
hey,
we're level.
Next one, get the next one. And it's like, no, these players need to be guided. You need to, like, help them learn by teaching them what they should be doing. Take this away on the block. We discussed doing this in video. It's not working. Let's pull the position 1 digger back. Position 6, let's back it up. Move a little bit to your left. Adjust from there. There was zero guidance, no adjustment discussion, nothing. And I lay that at the feet of the coaching staff, because you don't know what you don't know as an athlete. I think the one thing that they did figure out, which was very obvious, is being successful in college does not translate internationally. No one cares. Okay? You can be a great college player. It does not translate. I think they learned that. At least I hope they learned that, because it was obvious. But the coaching staff completely dropped the ball for me.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I was disappointed to see the stuff. Like, you didn't see them trying different things in an attempt to get better, to see what they were trying to do. Like, we saw Sarah Franklin hit the same shots we've seen her hit in college, right? Like,
and then finally against Czech Republic, they were forcing her to hit line. She missed the line 4 or 5 times in a row, and it's like, these are the adjustments. You were successful. You scored in the first 2 sets against Czech Republic, hitting your sharp angle that you really like. They changed their defense and made you uncomfortable, creating some errors. That is what volleyball is.
Well, and I think the reverse sweep was coaching and tactical changes.
100%.
And so, we'll see what comes of this week. Well, I'm curious to see what roster they bring. Like, they need to start winning some games. They have to make the final 8 because you need that experience for those players to play in that environment. And I'm curious to see what happens, what changes they make, if they come out, who adjusts their attacking style. Because here's the other thing for me is the U.S. doesn't have the players to run a slow offense and beat the best teams in the world. It's not going to happen. They need to add some speed into their game. They need to create some seams and some holes for their outside hitters. Like Franklin and Skinner, Eggleston are used to being physical enough to score points by being more physical and hitting hard. That is not you're going to need more tools than that. And so I'm curious to see how they put them in positions to learn that. Does Franklin add that line shot? How Skinner made some great tips against a smaller block, but that's not going to work against a bigger block.
To be fair, she didn't really get a chance. They sat her a lot until Korea, and the matchup, like Maddie Skinner against Korean block, like, good night.
Yeah. So to me, it's how are you going to change? How are they going to help these young players develop more skills, more shots, more ability to get out of trouble? And who's going to pass? That's
like, I'm sorry, but with this particular roster, you could not have Eggleston and Skinner on the court at the same time. You couldn't. They were both really struggling passing. Yeah, so while everybody's probably up in arms that Maddie Skinner didn't play, she started against Italy, did not do well. Eggleston came in and did a little bit better, which made sense why they stuck with her. But you cannot have them both on the court at the same time as left sides.
Yeah.
And I think a couple players, it was very obvious they were out of their depth. The most experienced player in Morgan Hentz, like, honestly, if I had to pick a player that I wanted more from, it was her. Just from a leadership perspective, I think leadership was also lacking, not only on the bench from the coaches, but on the court from the athletes as well. She was deferring and looking to her teammates to get a tip, to go set a ball. And it's like, no, as the libero internationally, at any level, you need to take charge of what's going on. But the number of balls she was deferring to for passing, etc., her out-of-system setting was unhittable. I wanted more from her.
I thought she passed fine. I thought she dug well when she decided to take it.
Exactly. She just kept looking at other people. It's like, you can't do that.
So I think from an execution standpoint, it's there. From a decision-making and leadership and telling people, she needs to run the defense. So she performed. When she performed better than I was expecting.
Setting
but it
for
needs
me,
to be
was not okay.
Passing and digging.
Okay.
And she just needs to get comfortable in that role and realize, like, I have the most experience here. I need to be directing traffic. I need to be taking more seams. She needed to insert herself into the fabric of the team a little bit more. I thought Lednicki was fine.
I thought Lednicki and Babcock were fine.
Lednicki's not the answer long term, I don't think. I was the most kind of impressed with how Babcock handled herself.
I think on the right side of the court, they were trying. They were scoring points. I think the blocking lineup, particularly for Logan, was not good. And I think Amber Igede, against the top teams,
they didn't serve well enough against the top teams. Yeah, they had 5 options all the time.
They weren't going to do anything. But I think against the Czech Republic and Korea, I think Igede solidified herself. She was solid. Yeah, my disappointment for the Americans was to see them A, play a college style of volleyball, and B, the coaching staff. So Adam kind of started touching on this earlier, but as we mentioned, there were a lot of young rosters, young athletes that were playing in week 1. So that being said, which young players made the biggest impression on you?
Okay, so I'm gonna miss somebody for sure. But what I did was I went through and I looked at, a lot of the athletes who were born 2004, 2005. Those were kind of elsewhere in the world because the North American athletes are in general kind of a little bit older because they go to college from an experience standpoint. But I was curious because we talk a lot about, hey, the U.S. is sending an inexperienced roster. And I wanted to look at, how do the young players coming up in some of these other countries kind of line up with the talent coming out of the U.S.?
Because let's not make any mistake. The U.S. athletes are not young. They're inexperienced.
Correct.
Like, there are some legitimate young athletes playing.
So, like, for example, the opposite from Bulgaria, and I'm way worse with names than Sarah is, but Stoyanova, she is a 2005 opposite, and I thought she was fantastic. She carried the load for her team. She was fearless. She hit angles. She was attacking front row, back row, blocked well, served well. I was really impressed by her. There was, I would say, a trio of young Dutch players who, some of these were a little bit older, that I thought were good in a combination of Dambry, Voss, and Koch. Again, 2002, 2003, 2004. I thought that was a really good trio who played well for the Netherlands. And then specifically from Serbia, Kurtijic in the middle was, I thought
who
she
we've
played.
talked about, played for Milano last season.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing where it gets a little interesting because she's a 2004 who's playing on one of the best teams in the world already. Like, you just can't compare her to, let's say, a Lednicki or somebody just coming out of college. Like, it's just, they're playing almost two different sports at this point.
Well, let's make no mistake. Ana Cristina from Brazil is 21.
Yeah. It's just, you look at the Chinese setter who's
16.
Like, and then you compare her to the options that you're bringing in, college-wise from the U.S. So in looking at that, I was kind of shocked to find out how young some of these star players are on some of these teams. And it kind of put into perspective for me, like when we're talking about a Maddie Skinner, when we're talking about a Sarah Franklin, when we're talking about, a Babcock, like Babcock's physical, she does well, but how does she compare to some of those other players?
Well, if these young international players came and played NCAA,
no, it would be
the landscape would be completely different. Like, it's not even close.
So, we talk about these young American athletes needing to develop and getting a chance. Like, those are the athletes they're chasing from a performance standpoint. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see, A, how the next couple weeks go, who stays on the roster, and then B, if any of these young players make world rosters and how they perform. Like, the U.S. is banking on these young players to develop faster than everybody else's internationally. And it will be very curious to see how they go about doing that. After watching this, my thought was anybody who you need or who you think might have a chance for 2028, you need to find them contracts in Europe on the best teams. They need to be playing against these other athletes.
Okay, so other than those ones you mentioned, who are your other favorite youngies?
Ana Cristina's really good.
Ana Cristina's okay.
And then Karatsu from Turkey. I thought she played well. She's 2003.
What?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, some of these players are very good. Like, starting big point getters. It's impressive to see.
So Canada had a couple really young ones.
Yeah. So Gerson. Guzin, 2005, got some playing time. I thought she was okay. She didn't look...
She was green.
Yeah. but there was potential there. I thought Thokboom did pretty well. The libero for Canada, Watson, I thought she passed well. Defensively, she got blown up. The speed of the ball was a little faster than she was used to. Like I said, I thought Babcock kind of showed the most potential on the U.S.
She is the youngest one, right?
She is the youngest one.
What is she, 20?
She's a 2005.
Okay.
So I would put her, like if I was looking at kind of the top prospects coming out there, I liked how she attacked the ball. I thought physically she was kind of in her element with some of those other opposites. Decision making on a couple plays was maybe not as clean as some of the other ones who have played internationally, but that's to be expected. I was, out of everybody I watched on the U.S., I was most impressed when she got a chance to play.
Well, and the Czech right side was young too.
Correct. Yeah, the Czech girl was very good.
So, yeah, there were a lot of 19, 20-year-olds that made a huge impact on their teams. I will be curious to see if they bring those players along to be subs for their, staple stars, just to continue to get them experience, or if they were like, this is your chance, let's see what you can do, and then we're going to send you back to U23 or whatever, or U21 for the summer.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of the young players coming in who were scoring lots of points were opposites. So it's a really good comparison of, what the U.S. is looking for and what some of her peers are doing.
Okay, so as we mentioned, we were kind of all over the place. We saw some teams bring their best athletes. We saw some bring more developmental rosters. So we just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a breakdown of the roster experience we saw throughout the week and maybe some predictions of what will happen moving forward.
Okay, so I looked at the rosters from an average age perspective for people who are actually on the week one roster, not including alternates.
Okay, so who were the old rosters, or who were the rosters who brought their legit lineup?
So, like, Thailand technically was the oldest team, but Italy had the second oldest roster. They brought all of their guns. They were ready to go. Dominican had a legitimate team there. They were the third oldest team there. Poland brought a legitimate roster at 4. The Czech Republic actually had a pretty old roster. Now, they've never competed in VNL.
So that was probably a scenario where it's like these players have been playing in the national team system forever, finally break into VNL, and they're like, okay, we'll stick it out. We want to try.
Yeah, and then Brazil had a legitimately older roster there. They were 6th overall. There were a whole bunch of teams kind of in the middle. So those rosters had an average age of like 25, 26. There were a whole bunch of teams, U.S. included, who were kind of in the 24-year-old roster.
Okay.
So you would have some young players, some experience there. The youngest roster by far was China. They had an average age of 21 and a half at this roster, which was wild. Netherlands had an average age of 22, so they were also very young. France at 23.
I think some of those players made the run last. Like, I recognize some of the Dutch players from the last VNL.
So even the young players who were like 2004s, 2003s, this is their third VNL. Whether they played or not, but they kind of have been around, seen how it works.
As far as an experience perspective, do we know? China, I think they brought their like babies.
Yeah, they brought China, not a ton of experience. The U.S., not a ton of experience. Italy, Brazil, Dominican, Poland was relatively experienced. Canada was pretty experienced. Of kind of the better teams who you would expect to do well.
What about Japan? I feel like
Japan was right in the middle, 24 and a half. I thought Wada was an individual athlete who stuck out to me watching Japan play. When they play such a defensive and serve aggressive game, she scored a lot of points for them. She had a fast arm.
So fast.
So she was fun to watch. I enjoyed watching them play. So they were kind of in the middle. USA was in the middle. Serbia was pretty young. Turkey was young but had some experience. Not their big guns, but they had people who had played
Serbia
before.
brought babies.
Yeah. Bulgaria was kind of in the middle as well.
So China, U.S., Turkey, Serbia brought their more inexperienced athletes, whereas like Italy, Poland, Brazil, Dominican, Canada brought a solid roster. In round 2, we are moving to Istanbul, Belgrade, and Hong Kong. My prediction is that you will see Turkey and Serbia bring their big guns because they're playing at home.
You better believe it.
I think Dominican has to keep bringing their big guns because they're not deep as a country. Canada, same thing. Poland, I want to say same thing. I think we're going to start to see the veteran athletes start to trickle in, but those are the ones that I think are going to be there for sure in week 2.
Which teams do you think have the depth to make significant upgrades?
I think Turkey can upgrade big time. I'm not sure how much of an upgrade Serbia can make because they had such turnover, but Boskovic is an X factor. Like, adding her to the mix just completely changes the landscape.
How much better do you think Brazil is with Gabi?
Well, Gabi and Rosa Maria. You know, I think Julia Bergman did a good job. I think she was solid. I think Gabi, her ball control, her consistency, I think she adds an extra dynamic that, it's like an intangible, you know? But it is tangible because she produces.
What do you think? Do you think China is committed to this roster for LA? Do you think we'll see any of the older athletes, or this is just how they operate? These are the athletes, they're young, we're going.
No, but they had like 8 on the long list who came back for this year. I think China's roster will evolve. They always kind of do weird stuff, and they'll keep their top athletes at home until the final. And if like the young ones get them there, fabulous. And if not, darn. You know? I'm not sure we'll see. I mean, Dalderop for Netherlands. There's a couple pieces that could be added for Netherlands. But the 2 that I think are going to get a big boost in week 2 are Turkey and Serbia. What
do you think the U.S. does?
Okay, I have some players that I think are going to be left home after week 1. My predictions for the switches, I think Zoe Jarvis will be left behind. I think Serena Gray and Anna Dodson will be left. And I think Ella May Powell will be left.
I'm expecting to see Avery Skinner and Dana Retke.
I'm expecting Lanier to show up at some point too. So honestly, if those 2 are going, I would leave Eggleston home too.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, the next round for the U.S. is interesting because they don't have any top teams. Now, I believe they have Serbia in their pool, so it'll be interesting to see what Serbia comes, but they don't play any of the best teams.
They already did that.
they already did that, but there's no gimme matches in their pool either. So, you know, with a record of 1-3 so far, if you want to make that top 8, this next round is going to be important. Like, this is going to be kind of a show me round for the U.S. in my opinion. They're going to need to win some matches. So I'm curious to see how they approach this.
I mean, the Czech match was a lost opportunity
100%.
in my opinion. But yeah, those are the ones that stick out for me as I think being left off.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Again, week 1, VNL, everybody's feeling things out. Some stars who had really long pro seasons are kind of allowed to take a break, kind of work their way back into the national team system. So obviously things are going to change, but it's fun to talk about anyway.
Yeah, and see what the priorities are, who's bringing which players, you know, which countries it's important for them to win. I think for me now, the management game kind of starts. Who do you bring? Like, I know the U.S. didn't have a ton of choices, in terms of people coming back from contracts, injuries, those kind of things. Now that you've had a couple weeks to settle in and make some choices, what does that look like?
Okay, let's get into some listener questions. Question 1, what can Minas fans, that is a team in Brazil, expect from Hillary Johnson next season? Do you think she's capable of stepping up for Canada during the summer now that Gray is absent?
Did you want my answer before or after this round?
After this round.
I was not impressed.
I expected more from her. I thought she would step up more with Alexa Gray gone.
And, I don't know what pressures these athletes feel playing at home. It's your first time back competing, first round of the VNL.
She was a good P2 to Alexa Gray's P1, which I don't think she has the P1 DNA.
Yeah, but I don't think she passed that well.
Also, so forget that. No, she didn't pass well.
So, and again, you have a new coach, you have a new system, you have expectations. Like there are a lot of changes happening in that program, even though a lot of the athletes are the same. And so I would say jury's out. Its expectations aren't super high after week 1, but I'll give her another round to see if she can kind of settle in. I know Brea O'Reilly got hurt at the end of that match in Serbia. We'll see if she can play or not and what happens at the setting position. Yeah, she's going to need to be better than she was this week.
As far as playing in Brazil,
she's going to get served a lot.
I think she'll get served a lot. I don't know. I think the Brazilian training system of just very high volume, high rep, I think is good. The Brazilian environment is very vocal. It's very loud to play in. The fans are very passionate about their team. I don't know her personally to be able to know how that will affect her. But the Brazilian league, even though a lot of the top national team players now play overseas, the league is still strong.
Yep.
I don't know how it's going to go.
She's going to learn a lot.
She will learn a lot. She will get a ton of touches. Will they translate? We'll find out. Question 2. If the U.S. women fail to show up and perform well this summer and potentially next year, do you see a lot of the players going back overseas to help develop their game, specifically passing, defense, out of system hitting? Will that hurt the future of the domestic leagues if they can't raise their level of play to mirror the Italian, Turkish leagues? Because this person was saying, I don't think it's any coincidence that a lot of USA's top talent are still choosing to play overseas.
If I was coaching the U.S. national team, I would send all of them overseas without question.
You can see it in the players we talked about today. You have 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds that are putting together just outstanding performances.
Winning Champions League, competing for championships. I'm sorry. I'm a fan of building a league in North America. I'm 100% behind that goal. But building a league and winning LA, those are two different things. And eventually, can the Love League or one of the leagues get to a point where it's a top league in the world? Yes, absolutely. I fundamentally believe that. But as of right now, you're not playing against the best athletes in the world. If you have I would send my top 4 players from each position overseas if I can, without question.
I think the athletes just have to figure out what their priorities are. Unfortunately, in the landscape of professional volleyball, as a North American, you can't have everything. You can't make a lot of money and play against the best competition and be comfortable and close to family, all at the same time. You just, it's unrealistic as a North American with how professional volleyball is right now. One of the 3 variables have to give. And you just have to decide which one is the one you're willing to sacrifice.
And I think like coming out of their first year of a cycle and wanting to be a part of the league as it starts, like Maddie Skinner and Sarah Franklin, like I get wanting to be a part of that movement, but you already see it. Sarah Franklin is going overseas, right? Dana Retke, Avery Skinner, already
Plummer.
Already overseas, right? Mm-hmm. And for now, that's what they have to do if they want to win in LA. And I think you're going to see Sarah Franklin be a different player next year after a year in Italy. It's going to change her game completely. If they want to win, they need to do that.
Question 3, is passing a mental skill just as much as a technical one?
Absolutely.
Didn't even hesitate.
I mean, if you're sitting there and you're getting bombs blasted at you consistently and you're thinking, please don't serve me the ball, you're toast. That ball comes so fast. The angles are absurd with the float serves that some of these girls are hitting. Van Rijk bombing jump serves at you. The ball's moving around. Like, you need an aggressive serve me attitude.
Oh, and if you change your facial expression at all, or if your eyes get big or look at the ground, everybody notices and they are going to destroy you.
Now, don't get me wrong. You need to be technically able to pass the ball as well.
It is both. It is 100% both. You're right.
Yeah. You can want to pass all you want, but if you can't do it, then it's not going to work either.
Okay, last question of the day. When players are deciding where to play professionally, it seems like salary and the competitiveness of the league are major factors. How much do things like the coach or even which other players are signed to the team play into that decision? For example, does the coach's reputation or the presence of certain teammates influence a player's choice?
I mean, I think that you're probably... I never had the luxury of making those decisions, so it's probably a question for you.
You are right. Salary, I think, salary, strength of league, life conditions do play a factor. I will say when I would make decisions, I would look at who they have on their roster, how they did the year before, what the potential outlook of the team looks like. Like if a team performed badly the year before, but they brought in a lot of good players, and the other conditions were right, I would consider it for sure. I would say coaches, when you get to the top teams, the coaches' resumes are all legit. So I wouldn't say that it necessarily is an impact if you're considering a really good team. If you're a more inexperienced player and your national team coach tells you, do you want to come with me to this team? You should probably say yes. But I would say the coaching and the teammates' decision is probably less of a factor than how good is this league? What are our chances of winning? Are we going to be in Champions League? What kind of money am I going to make? What is my quality of life?
Yeah, and I think probably the other thing with that is, you and I were married when you were playing most of your career overseas, so we were always together. So I think that for a lot of people, knowing at least one or having a native speaker on your team also helps. Well,
so for example, I played a season in Brazil, and then when it came to re-signing, for me that year in particular, it came down to going to Moscow or going back to Rio. And Moscow offered me a lot more money than Rio did. But I knew what I was getting into in Rio. I had a good experience there. I knew the coaching staff. I knew the players. I knew I was going to get better. The league was good. The money was nothing to slouch at. But when I thought about my life there, I was willing to sacrifice the difference in the salary for quality of life and things like that. So, yeah.
Lots of factors.
There are lots of factors to consider, for sure. As always, we love these questions. I always love seeing what people write in. It's always an exciting day.
All right. So week 1 of women's VNL in the books. Really interesting. Some great volleyball. If you didn't get a chance to watch them on Volleyball TV, you can go back and watch any of
Well,
the
and the
matches.
Americans are decided that it's going to be on CBS Sports and stuff too. So, like, literally the day before VNL started, they're like, oh, P.S., you can watch it here. Thanks so much for your membership.
So lots of good volleyball to watch. So the women have the week off. We're heading into week 1 of the men's VNL this week. We're in the same countries, China, Canada, and Brazil, for the men's VNL. We're in Xi'an, China, Quebec City, and back in Rio. We've got Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, Canada versus Germany. We've got Thursday at 8:30 Eastern, Poland versus Japan.
Very different styles.
Very different
Very good
styles.
teams.
That will be exciting. Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, France and Italy. Now, that's must-watch TV.
Yeah.
So I would circle that, get your popcorn out. That's going to be a ton of fun.
I hand-selected all these matches, you guys, okay?
These
for
are
which
Sarah's
ones,
recommendations.
Again, which ones were watchable based on the time and which ones I thought would be entertaining.
And then on Saturday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, USA versus Slovenia. So USA men and women are in a similar boat. We got a young USA roster, a Slovenian team that we've been told to not sleep on.
Don't sleep on Slovenia. They're good.
So it'll be interesting. One other thing I wanted to put out there, I'm curious to see is I'm curious to see the difference in coaching style, because you had two inexperienced rosters on the women's side and on the men's side, to see what Karch does with the young men he's bringing to this.
I want to
pool
listen
play.
into the timeouts.
Yeah, I'm. That's something I'm very curious to kind of see if the approach is the same, if it's a little bit different. What they look like. We followed the NCAA men, pretty closely to see. I'm curious to see if their style's the same. So I think that will be. It'll be interesting to watch them this week. So I'm looking forward to another great week of probably way too much volleyball and not enough productivity.
That concludes this week's episode of Volley Talk. There's always something shaking in the volleyball world, and we hope you enjoyed this little fix. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss any updates, and we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a 5-star review. You can also find us on Instagram at volleytalk_podcast. If you have a topic that you want us to discuss, be sure to let us know by reaching out to us on Instagram or at info@sarahpavin.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week.